Welcome to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. Your host, a behavioral scientist and bachelor, talks to leading experts and successful singles about living solo and living well. Travel more, make things, sleep in when you want to. Here's the playbook for the person who is unapologetically unattached. Now, please welcome Dr. Peter McGraw.
Welcome back. This episode gives you a glimpse into my other life as a business school professor and humor researcher. I invite two comedians to discuss my most recent book, Shtick to Business, with the intent of making your life as a solo more remarkable. It's a fun conversation that coincides with April Fool's Day and the relaunch of the book. I hope you enjoy the episode. Let's get started. Welcome to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. I'm Peter McGraw. Today's first guest is Jen O'Donnell.
Hi.
Jen works in development for unscripted television and is a stand-up comedian who runs a show in LA called The Ladies' Room. Welcome, Jen.
Hi, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me on.
This is your first time.
It is, yeah.
It doesn't feel like that, but
well,
it is.
I've been a guest of yours on other things, so it just feels like home.
That's exactly right. And we are joined by a return guest. People are like, oh no, not him again. Shane Mauss. Shane is a stand-up comedian, adventure, and science enthusiast. He visits universities around the world and interviews researchers for his science podcast, Here We Are. A close friend of mine, Shane, is a frequent contributor to Solo and a special contributor to my second book, which we are here to talk about today. Welcome back, Shane.
Am I the most common guest? Have I made the most appearances?
I'm afraid so, yes.
Yeah! You're stuck with me, buddy. And we talk on the phone all the time. You know
We
me.
do.
I'm a chatty Cathy.
The reason why Shane and my life are intertwined, A, and B, Shane says yes, C, I already lost, we're at A, B, and C, and then he actually does the homework, so we're in good shape. Maybe last minute, but he does the homework.
Yeah.
It's April 1st as of the launch of this podcast. It's obviously before April 1st now, and I am relaunching my book a year after unsuccessly launching it during a pandemic.
Remember when I tried to warn you against doing that very thing?
You know what? I do love a good "I told you so." And
I'm sorry, I don't.
No, I do enjoy a good "I told you so," even if it's in my direction, and it is an "I told you so."
In all fairness, you did send an email to your network that said, "Am I launching a book at the worst possible time?" So you were looking for an answer. So
now here's the thing: is we don't actually know whether it was the worst possible time or if it's the worst possible book. So we're gonna find out with this relaunch.
I have a friend reading it right now that they didn't tell me they were buying it or anything else, and they just wrote me one day and they're like, "Man, I've been reading this book and I'm getting so much out of it. More than I was expecting to." I think where you screwed up was you had me, a comic, attached to it, and then people have so little respect for comedy that it's like business lessons from the world of comedy. There's a million wonderful gems in your book.
There are, and a lot of them are from you, Shane. I really appreciate a lot of them. No, I think there's tons of takeaway, and there's a lot of laughs in there. Like the one that's sticking out to me is at one point you say like you always carry a notebook. That's what comics do. And then, it's like a hammer and a nail. Like if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And then you're like, that's also why I don't carry a gun.
So what we're going to do today, we're going to have some fun today. A lot of the solo episodes are fun, but I think this one will be especially so because we're going to take lessons from Shtick to Business and we're going to apply them to single living.
Oh, that's what we're doing. Okay. I might need a minute. I'm kidding. I'm ready. I'm excited.
And I'm tentatively calling this Shtick to being solo. They're making faces.
Pete loves the word shtick more than I do. I mean, for a title, absolutely perfect. But as a word to hear often,
Yeah, that's fair.
I think as a shtick, it's a good shtick as a shtick, if you will. Yeah. I also really like think funny. That's another. I like that a lot. So
That probably would have been the second choice for the book, which is to think funny. And I'm working on a project with Jen to turn the book into an online
yeah, I was
course.
just trying to like plug that like real low key. So
Ooh.
Yeah, that's coming someday.
yeah, Shane, maybe you can get in on that one.
Oh, I'd be happy to. I love online courses. That's how I educate myself, mostly through online courses. Yep.
Can I ask you real quick what you're up to, what you're doing?
No, we don't have time for this.
One course.
Send it in the back channel.
Robert Sapolsky has the best one I've ever seen, and it's free on YouTube.
Cool.
People cried and clapped at the end of that one, which no one has ever done at the end of one of my classes. Not simultaneously.
Not yet.
All right, here's what we're going to do. I asked each of us to take three lessons, apply them to the world of being single, of being solo, and we're going to try to awkwardly make this book fit into a solo podcast.
I love it.
We should probably just be very clear what this book does.
Yeah.
So I shouldn't do it because it's mine, and it sounds like me plugging it.
Why don't I do it?
That'd be great.
That's
then
a
lead
lesson
into
in the book that you have someone else bring you on stage. Let's implement our teachings and learnings. So the book is taking all of these things from the world of comedy. It's not a book about how to be funny, although there's laughs in it, and you might even pick up a thing or two, but it's specifically from the journey that so many comedians, improvisers, sketch writers, stand-up comedians have to go on, from open mics to writing to cooperating with the team of writers, and things like that can be applied to things like advertising in business, to things like think tanks and innovating new ideas. And so that's the shtick.
That's right. Yeah. So as I always say, serious business lessons from the masters of comedy. I have two masters of comedy on the line right now. And what is your first lesson?
So the reverse it, the kind of setup, twist, punch lesson in the book, which is such a clear, one of the maybe even overused comic device. I hesitate to say that. It's used so often, and I'd say quite successfully, to kind of spin things and help take on that alien anthropology look at life. And businesses can do this as well in terms of, there was fantastic examples in the book of, help me out, Pete. What was one of the great reverses was...
one of my favorites is the dumb phone.
Yeah. The idea that as every other phone is getting fancier and fancier, one company was able to stand out by just like, hey, some people still just want damn flip phone and don't want to mess with all the gizmos, and made a killing. So comedians do that with jokes quite a bit, and I think I've done that in relationships, though inadvertently. And I did something kind of called, typically I had been a serial monogamous person. I was in 4 about 2.5 year long relationships, nearly back to back. And what I learned in that is that I'm not good marriage material, which is good because I don't want to be married, but I'm also not good living with this kind of material. And so there's a section in the book called Bugs to Features, which sticks out a lot to me. And a lot of comics use this. We get on stage, we point out our flaws, we make fun of our flaws. It helps us come off as authentic and vulnerable, and it's very brave and funny at the same time. And in relationships, everything that makes me bad at the long-term thing, like it's hard to pin me down and I'm always traveling and always kind of spacey and innovating new, you can ask Pete every time I talk to him, I have some new project I'm working on and launching and big ideas, and some of them actually pan out, and then there's a lot of failure as well, and that's really hard in a long-term relationship. But in a shorter situation, it's very exciting. It means you get to travel around with me. You get to go behind the scene at clubs and have them, the first time that you're a lady and the guy you're with is the headliner and they come in and bring you free drinks and food and cater to your every need and all that. That's just a really interesting life experience that's very novel. when you live with that guy and you're traveling around and now you're at another crappy chuckle
More
hut.
chicken nuggets, more free chicken nuggets.
Listening
Chicken
to
fingers.
the exact same jokes over and over again. And I've been with 2 out of my 4 long-term relationships were comedians. And to me, I was like, yes, writing partner. And what happens is it starts like that. And then over time, every woman I've ever been with is eventually is like, you are obsessed with work. You don't stop. And it's too much. And I don't want to hear your joke ideas. I'm just done with your joke ideas.
That's why Shane calls me a lot.
Well, I'm also like bipolar too, and so I have like that bit of mania that, you know, a normal person would do well to be a little skittish of because there's lots of big pitches all of the time, and that will really wear old over the course of like a few years. But when it's new, wow. When you're new to me and you get to be on the ground floor of all my I always have new exciting projects I'm launching. And then you don't have to stick around to see all the failure. Terrific.
So I love the reversal. I start the book with it. And, you know, essentially the idea is you produce an opposing perspective. Everybody's going one way, you go the other way. It's a great way to make comedy, to create punchlines, premises for movies like Trading Places and so on. But it also is a good way to kind of think differently about the world.
Yeah.
If I'm hearing you correctly, Shane, while there's a lot of people who are like, I suck at dating, but I'm really good at relationships.
Yeah.
You're the opposite of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I always beat myself up so much for it too, because I like being in, Pete can testify, I fall in love quicker than like any human being on earth. And I'm like, oh, I meet a girl. First off, if we become intimate, like,
forget it.
It's just over. I'm like, I'm making plans of how we can move in together. My evolutionary psychologist friend, Marty Hazelton, she's always like, oh, you're the like lesbian that shows up with the U-Haul on the first date. That's you. And I wondered why I failed so much at that. And now I know. I just need the shorter, I'm fun for a year.
Yeah. Now you look at those as successes.
Yeah.
As honestly, like dating to me for a long time was just like, especially like a blind date or a Tinder date, was just like, oh, cool, a show. Like this guy has to listen to everything I say for like the next 2 hours. Yes. Yes.
Oh my God.
And I get dinner. So
That's hilarious.
you know, so like when I was dating and starting comedy, it was like, I was just like workshopping stuff. I was like, and the problem is that when it's Tinder and when it's things like that, you are definitely seeing people, you know, there's overlap, right? Like, oh, I went on a date with this guy. We'll go out again. I did go out with that one guy 2 weeks ago, and I would forget that I had told them certain bits, if you will.
Oh, amazing.
And so, yeah, so my nightmare was always like, and I have a tendency to exaggerate a lot. And so my nightmare is always like, they're going to see like, not only am I telling the same story, but like the joke is a little better than last time.
Turn the volume up.
That's kind of, yeah, that's
Absolutely,
amazing.
absolutely.
Because I'm a roadhead, my career's shifted some, well, especially with COVID, but for a solid 10 years, I was on the road going from club to club, you know, 5 shows, usually 2 shows Friday, 2 shows Saturday, sometimes 3 shows Saturday. And you're traveling, you're tired, you've told these jokes 100 times, and sometimes you go, oh, did I use this one in this show, or did I? And that's what your relationship.
Yeah. You know what? The real ones, friends and relationships, it's like when somebody tells you you have spinach in your teeth. It's like the real friends are like, you already told me this story. And I'm like, thank you so much for stopping me there, because that's a real friend.
I wonder if having multiple sex partners uses this. Wait, did I use the flick already? Did I?
So I want to clarify one thing before we get to Jen's. I can't wait to hear what Jen's is. So you talked about bugs into features, and I'm a big believer in this idea, right? Like we see our weaknesses all the time and we lament our weaknesses.
Yeah.
And what comics do is they turn their weaknesses into strengths.
Yeah.
And I like the fact, and this is actually really useful for singles, which is, I think I'm a lot like you two, which is I'm good at dating.
Yeah,
And so if you're good at dating, why don't you lean in?
You're right. Do
and
that.
enjoy dating more. Like have more, like, there's so many people who are like, oh, I hate dating. I hate the apps. I hate this experience. And if you just say, no, this is a little show we're going to be going to. We're going to have a good time. And I'm not obviously workshopping ideas, but I do enjoy conversation. And so it's just an opportunity for potentially good conversation.
I like that Jen as a comic too. That idea of using it as a show is so funny because it's a captive audience. Like they have to be. They can't really walk out. They're
not going anywhere.
Yeah. Like I'll walk. I know I'm doing something right if a couple people walk out each show, just like one table.
Sure.
You want one table to leave. You don't want like a bunch of people to leave, and you don't want everyone just enjoy. If they don't know you, you don't want everyone to like it because you're doing something basic.
Something's not right then either.
But this is, now you have a captive audience, and they kind of have to give it their best laughs too.
Every time. Yeah.
That's
amazing.
And tell me how brilliant I am. Obviously, they have a goal in this exchange, and so do I, which is to workshop my material.
And
theirs
is to make out with you. Yeah.
Exactly. And I will also say mainly wins for me. So this was, say, beginning of my stand-up career too, where I would be doing bringer shows. And I would just casually be like, oh yeah, come to my show. Great. Here's where it is. Or they'd follow me on social media, so they would like show up to a show. So then I just have like butts in chairs, They don't know each other. They don't know that they're both there to see me, It was really like a good 3-4 year system. It really was.
I'm wondering how many times I've gotten caught up in this grift.
It was definitely a grift. It was a grift for sure.
So I want to just point out one thing in the book. Maria Bamford does this. I don't know if you know this, but she'll land in a city and she'll put out something on Twitter and she says, buy you coffee. Yeah. I want to run through my set with you.
Yep.
And so she just meets with a stranger in a strange land, buys them a cup of coffee, and works through her stuff.
Yes, yeah.
Right there. Just to warm things up and to check it all out. I think that's really fun.
Yeah.
She did that on Twitter recently, and I responded. I was like, yes, please. I'll workshop your jokes with you. But she wanted a normal person.
She does like the normies. Yeah.
Normal people.
She told me that it's like such a flood of like excitement to like know that people want to be there, and then how cool it is that somebody just wants to like intimately connect like that, and that you can just like give that opportunity to somebody. It's like, and that's why I went on so many dates.
That's fantastic. All right, so let's at this rate, this will be the longest ever solo podcast. So let's get to number 1 of Jen's. What do you have for us, Jen?
Well, I did have Shock to the System was my first one. And when
I was like, what is that one?
And you were like, is that in the book? And I was like, Luckily I have bookmarks. And so I just pulled it. I was ready. Yeah. And then I said, did I interpret this wrong? You would like me to call this incredibly credible.
Incredibly credible. Yes, that's right.
And I'd like to figure out exactly what you mean by that as I tell you more, because
well, just the idea in that lesson overall is the value of being authentic, truthful, being able to express weakness. In the world of business, you always want to like put your best foot forward and show that everything's great and we're the best, and to highlight the positives and sweep the negatives under the rug and so on. And comics do the opposite of that.
Yes.
Right.
And I think what I honed in on was an example of, in the book, that it's Domino's, I think, is a pizza company that like just basically comes out, and instead of like trying to convince people that they should order their pizza, they just like straight up admit like, this pizza sucks. We're going to fix it. Yes. And it reminded me of a breakup. And in that breakup, I think having those like very honest conversations where I have 2 good friends that they're married, they call these no bullshit dinners. Oh. And it's just like, no bullshit. It's just like saying the truth. And in a breakup, I just remember looking at each other and being like, neither of us are better because we're together right now. And the idea that we could like improve wasn't possible. So like a Domino's pizza, it was like, we need to totally like, this can't be the same product, this relationship. And, I think this was a while back, so I probably didn't have the emotional skills yet, and he didn't have the emotional skills yet to work this out as adults. And so obviously the result was rocky. But looking back, I thought the best shock to the system in what this ended up being was I eventually had to change my entire life. Like, the relationship had to end, but then I looked around my apartment and I was like, I can't live here anymore. And then I looked around at my office and I was like, I'm going to still do this work, but I literally just need 4 new walls to look at because of those associations. So it was, for me, in order to like break free of that and to stop that pattern, I had to totally not change it, but to reverse course.
Tear it all down.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what Domino's did, right? So they
I model my relationship after most delivery pizza companies. Domino's is one of them, but Pizza Hut another. The personal pan is really good for the solo podcast, I think.
We are accepting sponsors. The feedback that Domino's had basically was that, the crust tasted like cardboard. And so what they did, not only did they admit that the pizza sucked, they basically started fresh and just changed everything as a result of that, which I thought was very good. And now is incredibly successful and popular and useful and not cardboard tasting.
Right. And Shane, you had mentioned like comics looking at these principles in business, and whether it's working with a team of people, whether it's being on stage in front of people. I also think that there's a lot of value in sort of how comics have to organize the infrastructure of their life. And I think there's a lot of similarities because comics are entrepreneurs, like we are our own business. And so I think I ended up taking a lot of those lessons of like, these jokes I've been working on for a year, I hate and I don't like. So what do I do? And the answer at one point was to throw everything in the garbage. I still don't know if those ingredients of that crust come back. It's possible. But like in that moment, it was, we have to have a completely new product. We meaning me and the business of Jennifer O'Donnell.
Yeah. I love this idea also of, when you think about this, really what underlies this is this notion of authenticity, pointing out your flaws, right? So they're on display with Shane, right? Yep. He's already mentioned, his challenges as a long-term relationship person, his challenges being bipolar, and so on. And essentially the idea is that there is something very sort of endearing, when someone sort of owns their shit, so to speak. Like, you're like, wow, this person is honest. I can trust them. There's something refreshing about it in a world where everybody's just has their guard up, is so carefully curating and manicuring their brand and their identity. And I think one of the things I will take listening to you for the solo listener is stop trying to shoehorn your life into some other person's wants and desires, the world's wants
into
and
the
desires.
Wrong packaging. Yeah.
Yes.
So I do this. I read YouTube comments, which most people are like, don't do that. I'm like, so, the ones where they're like, this guy's gay or whatever. I'm like, that's hilarious that this 12-year-old boy got like a kick out of saying that. And so like, those don't faze me at all. Like, just like, this guy sucks or whatever. Like, I don't care. But when someone is like, he used like so many times in that, I go, ooh, yeah, I sure did. and that sucks to feel that. And then I think, oh, I'm going to take down the number of times I say like in conversations by 10%. It's just going to require a little more effort. I'm going to need to think about it. Every time I'm going to use the word like, I'm going to say, he said instead, or something like, it takes a little extra effort, especially now that I'm trying to do it. And then the other thing is sometimes people meet me and listen to my podcast so much that they know everything about me. And they're like, is that weird that I know everything about you and you don't know anything about me? And I'm like, it's so great.
Yes.
Because I don't need to explain who I am.
You're already like at the 400 level. This is great. We're talking like graduate work now, That's excellent. Thank you for doing your homework.
Yes. So now we're ready to talk about convergent evolution. I don't need to talk about all of the other, like, more basic 101 evolution. Here's what I've been thinking about lately. You're on board.
All right, that's a good segue into mine. Mine's a big one. It's chapter 3, I think. It's Create a Chasm. And I really like this one a lot because it's something comics do all the time. You have to do it in order to be successful. It's not sufficient, but it's necessary. Moreover, good businesses do it. And Shane already demonstrated it a little bit earlier when he talked about walking a table. And so, like, the best shows, there's some people in there who's not exactly thrilled, and certainly people outside of the show are clearly not happy. But as long as the audience is laughing, as long as the people you care about as a comic are laughing, you can live a good life as a comic.
Yeah.
The problem is when you try to make everyone laugh, when you try to be something for everyone. And so I use this example of, in a world that wants hot tea or iced tea, if you serve them warm tea, in order to make everyone happy, you make no one happy.
Yeah.
And so you can see this in the world of business. One of my favorite examples in the book is Barry's Boot Camp. Barry's Boot Camp is this HIIT-based fitness class. It's basically like working out in a dance club. It's the music's crazy loud, that you're bathed in this red light, which makes you look fabulous because red light just washes out all of the blemishes and so on. Men take their shirt off in the class, and women are barely wearing anything to begin with. And it's frankly
my nightmare.
Not a scene for everyone. You know what I mean? And it's way too loud for me.
Yeah.
I went to the front desk, asked for earplugs. They gave them to me. If I had asked them to turn the volume down, they would have told me to take a hike. And so Barry's is successful because it's not popular to me, but it's popular to Jake Gyllenhaal, who goes to Barry's classes, and to all the, LA, New York, London types who like to be seen. But applying that to the world of being single, of being a solo person, I think it's a perfect example, because if you choose to walk this path, if you choose to celebrate being single, you're going to disappoint other people. Right? You might disappoint your aunt who's just dying for you to couple up. You're going to disappoint some friends who want you to be in lockstep with them in terms of their engagement, in terms of them having kids, in terms of vacations with the families.
Eventually.
And then eventually getting divorced, exactly. And so, if you follow the path that is right for you, you're going to make some people happy, you're going to make other people happy. But if you try to make everyone happy, you're not going to make yourself happy, I think. And my example of this is my friend Julie, who's a previous guest and guest co-host. Whenever there's like some event happening and she has some new friends who are going to meet me, right before they walk in, she says, "My friend Pete's going to be here. He's not for everyone." And I love that she does that because it's true, right? I may say something or do something during the evening that might be off-putting to some of these people. But it also allows me to not have to tamp down and hide the person that I am.
Yeah. I mean, everybody should come with that caveat, right? Like nobody is for everyone. This trio in particular, maybe more so than others. Yeah. But
those people have stopped listening already.
Yeah.
So
there is one listener. That's why it's called Solo.
No, I think that's really insightful. I think the social pressure of being single is exactly that. It's social. There's so much social pressure. And I think exploring the aunt, why she wants you to be with somebody, exploring the friend, why they want you to be with somebody. As much time you dedicate to that, I think it's important for you to explore. I'm literally talking to myself right now. Why you want to not be, why you want to be, or why you want to not be. So
yeah, I want to jump in because I had this conversation where actually a woman that I've dated, her friends and family like me, but they don't like me for her, if that makes sense. They don't,
Totally.
And I'm described by some of them as a commitment phobe. As a commitment phobe. And I think that that's such an interesting, bias that exists, because I could describe them. I could be like, why are they commitment addicts?
Yes.
Like, why are they addicted to commitment? And, and it's, to me, the issue is it's not, I think it's important to ask why, right? Where the default is commitment and to deviate from it is seen as a negative. Wouldn't it be wonderful if it was like, like toppings on ice cream? Where some people like M&Ms and some people like sprinkles. And it's not like, when you're like, oh, you're a sprinkles phobe. not having sprinkles on your, it's like, that's a stupid example. But the idea is that either of these things is good as long as it matches what you want.
Yeah.
In that way.
Yeah, and there's people in relationships that build on a relationship and grow stronger over time. And then there's a whole lot of people that are just like, well, I guess I'm stuck now. I guess this is how life goes. So I'll just...
That's actually really interesting. That's the first time that's popped through my mind, which is that I think if you are single often, you have to better yourself often. And if you are in relationships, you probably end up in a very stagnant place for much longer. And so, I talk to my girlfriends all the time, and the ones who are single, it's always this conversation of like working on yourself, right? And I'm like, are people in relationships doing that? Probably not. And so I think that that's a huge appeal to single life and to not being partnered, is because you're constantly in some, taking online education courses, for example.
Or making them.
Them. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the way I think about it is create a chasm, especially if you embrace your solo living, you're going to disappoint some people. Whether, if you simply say, I'm happy being single, and I never want to get married, or I'm happy being single, and if it happens, it happens. People are going to find that distressing, and other people are going to find that exciting.
Yeah, I went to see the Book of Mormon in Schenectady, New York, and it was in this massive theater, and there was a bunch of like blue hairs with season passes that didn't know what the Book of Mormon was. An exceptionally controversial, the most controversial musical there's ever been. And
if I may for a second, if people haven't seen it, I study comedy. I'm pretty impossible to offend. I mean, Shane is a great friend, so that's an example of how hard I am to offend. I sat there, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe they just did that.
Me too. As a comedian who spent like the first few years, like as a shock value-ish, like that was like a lot of my hook. I watched it and was like, oh my God. And to watch a bunch of people that didn't know what they were walking into. So the reason I bring it up is because sometimes that table leaving is what adds to the comedy. That people are like, oh my gosh, not everyone in this room's gonna like that one. And there's something about being a solo person too that has that same sort of vibe where it's just like, this person isn't vanilla, this person isn't for everybody.
And I've been developing swagger around it. I used to make excuses and be on the defensive. Now, I won't go on the offensive. Like, I won't throw stuff back at people, but I'm not going to apologize for it.
Yeah, and I think that this exactly gives people tools to go on the offensive in conversations, because I do think that there is so much, I guess, infrastructure in society for partnerships, right? So it isn't, I think, just sprinkles. It is like the parfait cup, like
yes, that's fair.
You're going against the entire, and I do love a parfait. I mean, TCBY.
Especially on a first date.
Oh, yeah. Dessert if it's going well. If we want to do another 10, 15, we'll go get a parfait. Yeah, I think it's important to have those conversations because there is going to be so much pushback. The world is built and designed for two. It makes people uncomfortable when other people are alone. And because it's just a scary thought that people aren't thinking enough about, it doesn't have to be. So I'll be on the offensive for you, and I'm engaged. So.
Well, you know what you're getting yourself into.
Not really, but.
This podcast enough.
Oh, I thought you meant in marriage. That's why I said not really.
All right, let's keep this moving. Shane, you're up next, number 2.
So this transitions nicely into the idea of cooperating. So there's a section of the book about forming teams and kind of writers groups. I know when I first started comedy, I should really get back to it because I dropped many of the habits that I used to have that were so fruitful for me. But I used to get together with comics all the time and put together writing meetings and stuff. And I think that in being solo, as it's not necessarily the norm, and there's so much pressure to partner up and then have like married friends and have your couple friends and all of that. There's, it's hard to, the notion of even having a solo podcast, like, I want to collect a bunch of people that don't like collecting around people, sort of. I know that's not quite the point, but Pete and I talk about this quite a bit, the idea of friend love. I have so many friends that I love, that I have such great relationships with, that I talk to all of the time. And I mean, being someone that spends a lot of time on the road, I also call a lot because I drive a lot in the before times. And I think that it's just such invaluable. I mean, I'm 40 and I still consistently lose friends to relationships, and it's definitely it changes things quite a bit. Like, I have so many female friends, like totally platonic. Some of them I'm super attracted to as well, but this is one of the great things that COVID's done, is like, well, we're in different cities. We're not going to have sex. There's a global pandemic. It might be 2 years before I can hug a person or whatever. And man, it's been, every time I was in a relationship, all my female friends, I was never really able to hang out with them as much. There's always jealousy and stuff that came attached to it. And I just cherish my friends so much more. And to think about how much of that you lose when you decide, oh no, I'm just going to spend all my time with this one person. It's just such a network. I mean, you can hope that kids are going to care for you or whatever when you're older, and it is true that it's got to be scary for Pete to think about me checking in on him when when he's in the nursing home.
Yeah.
But it's not like kids are some surefire investment to do that.
I have a friend, he's a good friend of mine from grad school. He's in his now late 50s, and he, like, within the first couple years of meeting was like, Jen, is it cool if you're the person who decides to pull the plug on me someday? And I was like, done. Hell yeah, Ned. Yeah. I will do that for you.
Yeah.
And you need to...
I'll pull plugs.
Sure.
Pete's a great plug puller.
Oh, that actually... I can see him being very rational about that.
Yeah. We're going to Switzerland, Shane, when you're ready.
Yeah.
There you go.
I'll fly you business class.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I got lots of miles.
And Pete is 10 years older than me and definitely going to live longer, without a doubt.
When TV is ready, I will pitch Pete McGraw's Death Flight show. And
That's not bad.
It'll be a beautiful story. And it'll be, I think the world isn't ready, but they will be.
First of all, it's interesting you say this. So I'm going to work backwards from these things. So I do have a designated plug puller. Her name is Janet. We already have it worked out. And she is...
I love it.
And I'm going to finance it when I'm ready to go. We're going to go to Switzerland.
Okay.
I love this.
First class. She can stay as long as she wants afterwards. She just brings my ashes back. It's all set up. She will outlive me.
My fiance and I have decided that we're going to Notebook. So I don't want to give away any spoilers here. It looks like Pete's never seen the Notebook. So, but that's our plan. So.
What is the movie where they drive off the cliff and hold hands?
Thelma and Louise. That's my other favorite movie.
So I want to back up to the cooperate. So the lessons cooperate to innovate. And in it, we talk about lone genius, and whether it be in comedy or business. And yet when you look at the lone genius, what you often find is sort of the guy behind the guy, or the guy behind the gal, or the gal behind the gal, or the gal behind the guy behind the gal, etc. And you see this. So I like the example of Chappelle Show. Neil Brennan co-created Chappelle Show. He was a writer on every single one of the sketches, including some of the best comedy sketches in the world, even though it was called Chappelle Show. And so regardless of how amazing Dave Chappelle's talents were, he needed Neil Brennan to do that.
I think he needs them back. He's put out like well over an hour of quote unquote comedy in the last year or so, and I haven't heard a single joke.
I know. I keep watching and I'm like, wow, he's saying some interesting things. And then I'll be like, but there's nothing that I'm not laughing though.
Yeah, so Neil's an incredible joke writer. And so where am I going with this? I say this time and time again, solos need a team.
Yeah.
And you find this in a variety of areas of comedy. For example, improv, you need someone else to set you up. One of my favorite sayings is from Del Close, one of the fathers of improv, says that we are all supporting actors. And so in our friend love, as Shane was talking about, we're all supporting actors. Like, if I'm trying to make Shane a better person, and Shane's trying to make me a better person, and you're trying to make Shane a better person, and vice versa all the way through, we all have a chance to become better people. And at certain moments of time, we can especially shine, like on an improv stage. But what's really cool about this, and you two as stand-up comedians can appreciate this, is even the most lone wolf stand-up, the road warrior, the person who's out on the road, they live alone, they travel alone, they may even keep to themselves a lot of the time. And so on, even that person has help, right? They have other comics who help them punch up jokes and give them feedback. And they have an audience that helps them make their material funnier, because every previous audience makes the experience of the subsequent audience better. That is, they give feedback in that way. And so I'm just a big believer in that idea of having a team, of which friends are incredibly important.
Even that sort of American idea that you can build up yourself. It's just like a myth, we need each other. And unfortunately, we've learned that the hard way in the past year.
Yes.
I also love that there's not kind of the same expectations for monogamy. There's not a lot of jealousy going on with friend love. I felt a little like, why does Janet get to pull the plug? I want to pull your plug.
I thought at first that you said Jen, and I was like, oh my God, I got two now, and I was nervous. So Shane, you can have it.
So, this is something, I just did a recent series on making remarkable friends, and I define what makes a friend and what makes a friend a good friend. And one of those things is anti-jealousy, or what we call compersion.
Yeah.
And the idea is that a good friend celebrates your successes and commiserates with your failures. They're not trying to outdo you. They don't get jealous when they see you succeed. Mm-hmm. And that is not normal in a lot of relationships. And so the idea, especially when it comes to sexual jealousy. But in the poly community, the idea is like, if one of your partners has great sex with another partner, you celebrate that because, wow, my partner felt great pleasure, rather than seeing it as some risk to the relationship. And in the same way that, like, when Shane succeeds, when you, Jen, succeed, I want to celebrate that because I want to see my friends flourish.
You know what I want to do? I want to take a female friend to a sex club with me. And just like, hey, Jen, you and I go in here. Let's pretend to be a couple. Let's find a hot couple and then pretend we're swapping. And then we just both get to bang hot people.
Only if I can.
And then we handshake.
I'll do it if I can pull your plug someday. Then I know we're really friends.
There's so much, I don't know. The friend love, it's just such a... I like opposite sex friend love is also something like really special. I don't know. Just everything about it.
This came up in the solo room at Valentine's Day that Pete had in Clubhouse. We were talking about, now it's sort of culturally, people know about Galentine's Day, which is girlfriends, it's the day after or the day before Valentine's Day. And it's like, my friends and I would do that. I mean, really, we would meet for dinner and, right now we're not because there's a pandemic, but we did a FaceTime, whatever. And it is, to me, a tragedy that doesn't exist for men. And so in the Clubhouse, we came up with Palentine's Day, but maybe there's something else. But I think that I keep saying the word infrastructure. I don't know why, but there needs to be I'm running for solo office. There needs to be infrastructure for male friendship, for things like that, to enhance your solo life.
Also, straight male-female friendship is it's such a eye-opening thing for me because I think I'll have female friends that are dating.
It's a cheat code for dating.
It is because it's these female friends, they dream of having their gay friend or whatever that they workshop by, like, oh, then I can get inside of a guy's head. It's like, no, I'm better. I'm a straight, like, when you're dating somebody, I can actually tell you for sure what they're thinking. And when you're overthinking it, that sort of thing, and you can help make sure, like, I shave my beard before putting my face on a dating profile and stuff like that. That's stuff that,
yeah,
like,
there's trade outs. Yeah. It's comedic translation services for
That's great. Well, let's actually turn to your next one, Jen. So I want to just recap so far. We did Reverse It. We did Incredibly Credible, Create a Chasm. These are all very big lessons. And then Cooperate to Innovate, also a big lesson. Is your next one one of the big lessons or one of the smaller lessons from the book?
I guess you'll decide once I tell you, because I forget. Okay. This is, I think, maybe a smaller one. It struck out to me, liminal spaces.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, briefly, a liminal space is some sort of transition period. And as a comedian, I think you live there. And I think that's maybe even in the book, that as comedians are these kind of like interlopers. Mm-hmm. You know, you could be an interloper of culture, but I think you can also be an interloper of eras or generations. You know, you can see things for what they are in the present, and even if they might not make sense. So, I mean, right now, we are all living in a liminal space. The pandemic is sort of this like 2022 double question mark, you know, like one of those cool parties. Remember when people used to have party invites on Facebook and you could click like 2 question mark and you knew it'd be fun. So it's like nobody can really tell you when this is over or how it's over or when, you know, and I think that it is so clear that we need comedy in that liminal space. And I think that people think liminal spaces are limited, like they will end. Like I'm engaged, that counts as a liminal space.
That's a perfect example of liminality. Yes.
Like I'm existing between being single and being married. And, you know, we live together. We have decided to be together. But it's still different. There's still things that have to be put on paper to be married. So we exist in liminal space. But I think if we are really honest with ourselves, or at least this is how I see it, as a comedian, like life is a liminal space. There are no tiny, you know, it is maybe a bunch of liminal space within a large liminal space. So we're all always in this transition. We're all always in something with, you know, a question mark ending. And comedy for me, is what is helping me literally survive. And my sense of humor, I've noticed, I don't know if you guys have felt this, I haven't seen this anywhere yet, but my sense of humor has evolved by digressing and regressing so much. Like, if you send me a joke about barf or farting right now, it's like, it sustains me. And I never... Like there's
I don't know why I've been holding back.
I don't know why you're not holding back either, but like the sort of the de-evolution of my sense of humor is directly related to the liminal space that I'm in right now. But it's also the seeds of where my sense of humor came from. It was where it began. So yeah, I think like thinking about being single as a liminal space is sort of limited thinking. I think you can think of having your relationship with yourself. That's forever. And by forever, I mean this tiny, 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 tiny bit of existence that we all get on this tiny, 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 tiny rock.
That's why Pete's not going to want to hear this as much, but that's what I love so much about COVID. It's such a liminal. I have friends that tell me all the time, they're like, Shane, you love COVID. You're going to miss it. And I don't. Yeah. I'm not going to miss being cooped up. I'm going to miss the global head fuck and the constant shifting and the shaking up of the psychology and people being like, oh my gosh, life is unstable or whatever. Yes, and I'm like, no, we've always been
unstable. We're always on the brink.
It's just that you've been in a recliner on the knife's edge. And I love that people are becoming aware of that. And I love that comparison to like this single life kind of, because what you're saying is that it's highlighting the liminal space.
It's highlighting it, but it always existed.
But it's all exactly. Yeah. And that's what I love about pandemics, it turns out. that to me, it's like a mushroom trip. And I think that when you say that, it makes me reframe all of my breakups and everything else. Because here's the thing I always felt guilty about. Last thing, I know I get wordy, but I've had like 2 out of the 4 relationships where, the breakup finally happens. I'm the worst at breaking up, by the way. Jen, you sound fantastic at it. I'm so jealous of that trait.
Thank you.
I'm the worst.
It's only because I fear for my life, but that's called being a woman.
I literally, after a breakup, I'll like go in my car and like go off to the gig or whatever. And I'm like, yes! And it's just like the most exciting thing. And I always feel so guilty for being so happy. But man, I just love a transition.
Yeah, it's like, ooh, we're on a fresh road all of a sudden. I remember I broke up with somebody I dated for 4 or 5 years. And I remember the morning I woke up, I was shocked. Because I felt so good. It was like, oh my God, all of these problems I've had for so long, I don't have to think about anymore. They just end. It's like quitting a job, which I also love to do. Yeah, I think that, Shane, you've said the alien anthropologist thing before, and I think that was in the book. I do comedy, but my day job is to develop reality TV in its simplest form, is me finding who I think is interesting in real life, who should be on television. And I have a friend who describes this as the outsider artist of anthropology, because I am not an anthropologist and I have no degree in such thing. But my job is to say, what part of what current is this and who can I pluck from it? Because this is a thing that exists. And how do we hone in on that?
So Pete's death show might actually happen.
It could actually happen.
Wow.
Peter McGraw's Death Flight.
Oh, wow. I'm so excited.
By the way, you could avoid all sorts of international laws if you do this in a plane in the right places.
The Death Flight show?
That's true. Yeah. I mean,
you just kill someone in a plane.
This could honestly be something you pitch to Elon Musk. Why stick to the Earth? Let's take it to space.
Pete is so bad at crime.
So I want to just put a bow on this one, or we're never going to finish this podcast.
Yes.
So
I can't. Never mind.
The liminality idea I like because it does highlight. So Jerry Seinfeld says that you people, comedians, are humanoids, right? They're not quite aliens. They're not quite humans. They know enough, but they don't see things in the same way because they don't exactly fit in. When you're in one of these transitions, it allows you to recognize things in a way that you don't. One of the things, though, that I hear about, what I hear you talking about is there are these sort of moments of transition, especially when a relationship ends, where you feel this, not just an insight, but also delight, freedom.
Yeah.
And I just want to point that out because there's a lot of people who, the way I sort of describe this there's kind of 2 categories of singles, right? So there's the traditional single, the person who's waiting out, biding their time until Mr. or Ms. Right comes along, and then their life can really get started. And then there are what I would call solos, the people who are happy with their single life. Some of them want to remain single their entire life. They're single at heart, so to speak. Others are open to it. If I meet Mr. Right, if I meet Miss Right, then by all means, I'll make the change that exists there. And what I like about the solos is they don't treat being single as a liminal space.
Yes.
Even if they may treat the world and our lives as liminal because they are indeed temporary and constantly transitioning.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
In that sense.
Exactly.
So,
I think there's a lot of power in calling it not a liminal space, but just, your existence.
That's exactly right.
Everything's temporary.
Yes.
Including, I don't want to bring up the death show idea again. I know that.
Well, this podcast is not feeling temporary, so let's keep it moving. Mine, I'm going to do a brief one, and mine is, and I got one of my best compliments that I received from the book was from an early reader. My friend Rachel sent me a text as she was reading a draft of the book. She said, I've read 200 business books in my life. So she's a hardcore entrepreneur and an avid reader. And she says, I've never once read a book that talks about writing. And I dedicate an entire chapter in Shtick to Business. The title of the chapter is Write It or Regret It. And in it, I talk about how comics carry around, you talked about that notebook. They carry around the notebook. You know, they see that notebook as more important than the microphone in terms of their success. And in it, they capture ideas. They don't let them slip away. I'm sure you two have stories about this. They clarify ideas. They work on this. And then for some of them, their writing is to communicate ideas, to write a script or something like that. I constantly push people to journal for, at the very least, the first two reasons. There's so many ideas, so many things that happen in our life that slip away. And if you have a regular journaling practice, I think it's a useful way to capture what's happening in your life, to be able to revisit it. When I started journaling as a result of writing this chapter, I'll admit that I'm a bit of a hypocrite. Mm-hmm. And it's fun to look back at my journals and realize how anxious I am about things that don't ever deserve any anxiety in hindsight, for example, so I can learn from that. But it's also a place that when you thinking and speaking is fast, but writing is slow.
Yeah.
Writing slows you down, and it has a chance to, and also it requires precision. You know, we don't write likes in our writing. You know what I mean?
Shane does.
Shane might, but we focus, and, you know, writing demands precision of thought. And so I like to encourage people, and I think singles, actually anyone, but, you know, my single listeners, my solos, I think it's a place as you're puzzling over things, putting pen to paper. And I really do believe that a physical notepad is superior to your notes section of your phone.
Can I give a quick plug? Lech Term, it has a table of contents.
Ooh.
Is this a planner?
It has a page.
Yeah.
No, it's a notebook, and every page has page numbers.
Okay.
And then in the beginning, blank table of contents, so you can put your
you just changed my life.
Pages.
Do you know in my journals I do this? I save 3 pages so I can make a table of contents.
No way.
Yes, so that at the end of my journal I can go back and then write what each page was kind of about. That way I can open up the table of contents and be like, "Oh, I'm still worried about this dumb thing." Let's see what I said.
Have a new sponsor.
I don't want to oversell this, but man, I started using these 3 months ago, and holy crap, it's changed my life, and it's a beautiful notebook and everything else.
Tell me the name of it again. I'll put it in the exhibit.
Yeah, it's Lech Term, LEUCHTTURM, 1917.
Lech Term, 1917.
So that was my second one. Write it or regret it, and in particular, journal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you're single, you could end up writing Eat, Pray, Love. So, and then be set for life.
Yes. There was a counter to that book called Eat, Play, Fuck that didn't make as much money.
I'd still read it.
All right, let's do the final round more as a lightning round,
sure.
If we can.
Well, that's perfect, because this is my last one, builds on and kind of puts a little bow on all of the stuff that I and we have kind of already discussed, which is success by 1,000 cuts. And this is the idea, I think, that the example that I use in the book is that when I started in comedy, my writing style is a little different now, but my process was basically I write a ton of jokes. I write 100 jokes. I pick 10 of them to try out on stage, and 1 out of 10 of those works, and then 1 out of 10 of those ones that worked makes it into like TV or the full-time like headlining set or whatever. So it's about 1 out of 1,000. Anyone had their calculator out, I might be missing a 0 or adding 1 there, but that's the gist of it. But
in the book, Shane calls it the 1 billion joke rule.
And I used to be very good at math, and now I can't do adding zeros onto things. But I think that this is, for me, The reason why I picked it is because the 4 serial... Now, by the way, all of my relationships, I never wanted to get married. I never wanted to have kids. I was always very honest with that from the get-go. But I always loved the idea of spending my life with somebody. I'm still not opposed to it, but it just didn't work over and over again, and tried different, and it was basically what I found out was that I love 1-year-long relationships. That's what, that I'm great for a year, which is like a little bit too much time to like get, it's hard to find a female to agree to the old 1 year.
What happens? Do you start like comparing holidays? Like this Christmas gift was not as good, or like this Groundhog's Day is Groundhog's Day. Like what's the
the first year is just like everything's exciting and
this
fun.
This is not feeling like a lightning round, is it?
And
let's start with New Year's, actually, just to piss Pete off.
Well, I'm sorry, listeners, for packing so much incredible content more than usual into this extended special bonus episode. Basically, that's where I learned the bugs to features things and everything that I've already kind of discussed. I learned in the hell of those multiple tours of war that I did.
Okay, wait. So are you saying, I want to make sure I understand this. So the Success by 1,000 Cuts is, it talks about the process of that comics are, I like to say that vaudeville was the first lean startup. The idea that you would go out on stage, you would try out a joke. Yeah. If it bombed, you would throw it out. If it kind of got a laugh, you would tweak it and try to make it better. And that process where you have very little downside risk, right? Mm-hmm. A joke doesn't work, no big deal, you move on to the next one. But a single joke could be a career maker.
Yeah.
And so in that way, it has unlimited upside, but very little downside.
Yeah. I mean, I guess mine is like, really, Success for 1,000 Cuts in the context of this conversation should be about dating a bunch and having like these risk-free things. But for me, I guess it's like success by 4 deep cuts. that I learned a lot from. It's somewhere in between there because it's not marriage and it's not like a divorce and trying another. It's something else, and just honing in on, I do like being in a relationship, but not for that long. And from that, figuring out like, oh, what's it like to just be friends with some more females instead, or date or travel around and not get attached to anyone and have like a couple one-night stands and stuff like that. Just a lot more trial and error than the old days of like your grandparents getting together in high school and staying together for the rest of their lives.
Well, no offense to Jen, but, in many ways, a marriage is exactly the opposite to writing a joke. Like the idea is that the potential downside of a failed marriage tends to be pretty big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In that way. And that's why you should take your time, and it's why you should have an engagement. It's why you should do all those things.
Marriage is like jumping into a pit of 1,000 blades.
Or 4 very big blades.
And hopefully, yeah.
Well, hey, we're happy to get a food processor as a sponsor.
Yeah. Well, now it's a magic bullet. That's maybe a KitchenAid. Yeah, I even think like the trial and error, though, or even the conversation about like grandparents and how they dated. I just think that especially women had so many less options to be able to do that. And that's exactly when Pete told me that I was talking too much and too loud. But I do, I think that why not lean into the opportunity we have now, especially as women, to reinvent what your personhood in your life looks like. And that didn't necessarily exist before. It didn't exist for my grandmothers. So why not lean into it?
Yeah, I think this is, I don't know. I just think there's a lot of room for living a different style.
Yeah.
And if we, again, and I had you on here, Jen, because I'm not anti-marriage. I've met your partner. I think it's great.
Yeah.
I think this is about people finding the right fit for their stage in life, for what their lifestyle's like, for what their goals and wants and desires are.
Yeah.
And so
I think being a comedian, and even sort of, I guess, where my perspective of working in the entertainment industry met applying it to a relationship is this idea that if there's a deal on the table and it's not good, that I'm not going to take it. So if somebody is going to be my partner and I'm entering a partnership, I have the ability to say yes or no. So take it if it's good. And if it isn't, then set up your solo life and set up your single life to be as good as possible.
Well said. That's great. So what is your last in what is proving to be somewhere between a normal round and a lightning round?
Okay, I can do a lightning round for you. Okay, so I picked out rituals.
Mm-hmm.
I love a ritual. I was raised Catholic, so I think that must come from that somehow. They love a ritual in the Catholic Church. My rituals, I think that they evolve and they change, but that they're really important in my creative process. And they're really important in my processing of emotions. So, when I was single, what I would do every Sunday morning, I would go to a coffee shop, I would bring a book and read the paper or hang out for hours just with myself. And that was my Sunday morning. It's now interesting that I say that with Sunday, and I do associate rituals with church, but
you just swapped one out.
You swap one out.
With a more comfortable chair.
Yeah, I think that a more comfortable chair and better coffee, better drinks,
Yes.
A sip of wine, how long is that going to last? That's nothing. That's not enough of a treat.
You're not getting the good stuff.
Yeah, but they evolve. So now I read the obituaries on the couch with my partner every Sunday morning.
Do you really do that?
I find it so interesting.
Wow, that's fascinating.
That is one of my rituals. And I think it obviously has to do with the liminal space we exist in currently. But I tend to do the same things over and over again. I love to wear the same shirt. I love to wear the same jumper. I've loved working from home because if I could wear the same outfit until I just literally wear it out, I would.
Until it's in tatters and falls
in
off
tatters. I only listen to one Taylor Swift or one Jenny Lewis album constantly, just on repeat. And I have to have it in my AirPods because it would annoy anybody to hear the amount that I re-listen to things and re-watch things. And so I think doing that, I think what I'm trying to say takes me to a specific place where I know I can break something down, where I know I can think about it. So rituals are a way to spur my mind frame or my mindset into something that I'm familiar with, to do some kind of work, to do some kind of self-work.
Yeah, well, so this is part of a larger lesson in the Work Hard or Hardly Work chapter. And, in that chapter, I try to point out that we get mixed messages. You get a message about the value of boredom, and you get the message about the value of grinding it out and working hard. And the way I interpret this is some of us need a little more boredom, and some of us need to work a little harder.
Yes. Yeah,
and
that's good.
The solution to that, I like to say, is to grind and then release, right? To do your work and then let yourself be social, enjoy yourself, go off, and so on.
Yeah.
But I'm a big believer also in rituals, which is I believe that habits are the cheat code to success in life, where you remove the need for willpower, you remove the decision making. And so, we're really good at just automatically reacting to a situation. And so in your case, you had this ritual around Sunday mornings. If you didn't do it, you felt off. And so you created a habit there. But I think that you take a habit and you add something special to it, you ritualize it, and then it feels special.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a nice way to go about whether it be exercise, socializing, work, and so on, is to have that sort of specialness with regard to our habits.
Yeah. And I love to make things special for no reason. It's one of my gifts. And I do think that if you have to invent, I think a good way to figure out what rituals already work for you is to lean into the weird shit that you already do.
Yeah.
So, because otherwise it is trying to create a habit, which is hard.
Shane, do you have any rituals?
Oh, man, as you guys were talking, I was just like, wow, I don't have a single ritual. And
Really?
I know, I've read a fantastic book, The Power of Habit, and they make a nice case for having that little Pavlovian reward that you give yourself. And I was just sitting here thinking, I think I might need a ritual. I just associate it so much with church stuff, and I was raised Catholic, so I'm averse to anything churchy, and it doesn't need to be. But no, I need rituals. I don't have
My Mine is a simple one, is I start the day with a cappuccino. And I'd either make it for myself or I go to a coffee shop and have one made to my exacting standards. And it is delicious, it's brief, and it signals I'm about to begin creative work. And so it's something to kind of look forward to and kick it off. And it's just, now it feels a little weird if I don't have it.
Yeah. I have a new ritual where I go up on the roof and I look for birds in my binoculars at sunset. And I think that I'll probably get some phone calls from some neighbors soon, because at the end of the day, I will look up at the roof and I'm like, people just see me up there with my binoculars every day at sunset, just like looking in their windows for birds.
That's great. Well, I'm going to wrap it with the final one, which is also the final chapter in the book, which is called Take a Bigger Stage. And I think that comics are especially good at seeking out bigger stages. They're good at seeking out bigger stages literally in terms of going from open mics to clubs to theaters to arenas, so to speak, but also bigger stages in terms of making the move to New York or Los Angeles to kind of cash in on their abilities. But also, I think that comics also are really early adopters. So, they were early to Twitter. We've talked about Clubhouse. They're on Clubhouse. They're good at experimenting and seeking out platforms that can increase their reach that's there. And I apply this lesson in the book to sort of more everyday people, not in terms of business, but in terms of sort of professional development, career development, and so on. And so sometimes if you want to take your career to the next level, you might need to move to a new city, or to move to a job in a different company. I talk about a place, right? So an actual physical location, a platform, right? That may be in the case of a company or organization or a brand. And then the last one is perspective, to take a bigger perspective. And in the book, I talk about how I essentially train myself from being what we call prevention focused, which is trying to avoid bad outcomes, to being promotion focused. That is to approach good outcomes. And what I want to say to my solos is you can apply these same principles to your life, in particular because solos have optionality. They have mobility because they're not necessarily have to make decisions based upon someone else's wants, desires, needs, career, and so on. They can move to a new city. They can move to a new country. They can give up their apartment and become digital nomads. They can give up a career that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to give up because they need to be a breadwinner or co-provider. And they can also give up old perspectives. That is, this belief that there is only one acceptable path in life, which is to couple up, buy the house, the white picket fence, the family, and so on. I'm not saying that solos have to take a bigger stage, but what I want to do is point out to them that they, in many ways, have more opportunities to do that because they have more flexibility, more mobility, more autonomy in which to do that.
I love it.
And I think we should probably end there and just know that this might be the last time I ever refer to Shtick to Business on this podcast ever again. My plan is to really lean into the solo stuff. It has been not only personally rewarding, I can't tell you the number of people who reach out to me and tell me how much they appreciate this work. And I just think that there's more and more to build with regard to this project. And so the month of April is going to be my last foray into Shtick-related stuff, unless something changes.
Awesome. I love it.
I'm so glad that we know everything about it so that you could... No, I think it's really valuable work. I think it's valuable for a lot of people, and that you are early to adopt this social movement.
We'll see how it goes. So thank you both for the support, and for Shane for contributing to the book, and for you, Jen, the future work, that one last project we're going to do, which we'll do someday when we're all vaccinated.
And it's going to be soon.
Indeed. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. For more about our guests and show notes, go to petermcgraw.org. Please subscribe and share with your single friends.